Hello and welcome back to Parley. This prompt was written by Liquid. Hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about meme builds. Liquid begins, some games with build-heavy systems lend themselves to builds the community ends up categorizing as memes. But looking at it on a game-to-game basis, there's no real sense of consistency in my eyes, which has led to some always lingering questions I've had on the topic. How does something become classified as a meme build? Just from the subjective humor of it? Or maybe because it's using unconventional and or bad tools to succeed? A bit of both. And there are more questions, but I want to start with that one. There's going to be a kind of section 2 about developers and their relationships to their game and the meme builds players make out of it. But to get there, we need to talk about meme builds. What is a meme build? I'm actually not sorry that I do this Socrates existentialism shuffle in like half of every parlay. You wouldn't be paying for them if people didn't like that, so I figure that's what people want. And that's what I think is the suitable approach here too. I would go further than you, Liquid. I don't think that there's just no real sense of consistency from our perspective. I think there truly is underneath no real uniting concept to meme builds. I'm going to propose to you in this parlay that meme builds arguably do not exist. And how I'm going to do that is the following. Step 1. We're going to reject strict definitions. People don't all agree on the same definition of meme build. No, they don't. If you just thought they did, try saying what you think your definition of a meme build is to other people, and don't just say it to them and ask if they agree, because statistically they'll probably lie to you to be agreeable. Have them write it down. Have you write your definition down. Don't show them to each other, and then at the same time show them, and that will prove to you that people do not agree with your single definition of meme build. Sorry, maybe preaching to the choir here. Certainly Liquid doesn't need to hear that. We don't all agree on a definition of meme build. We are going to argue in good faith and say that a good version of arguing that meme builds exist would involve good definitions, and good definitions for casual conversation are more like word clouds. There's no strict definition, no strict boundary, just a way to say that things are more like meme builds. If they have these qualities that are in the word cloud, if they have a lot of them or whatever, they're more like a meme build, and that's good enough. More of a definition than that simply isn't useful to normal people. It's useful to scientists sometimes, but it just isn't useful in normal conversation. So we're going to argue in good faith and say not just the kind of stupid version of a definition where you insist that it's just one closed-minded thing and then it obviously isn't, but no, a good version of a definition of a meme build, just the collection of ideas that make something a meme build, even that perhaps does not exist. That is what I'm going to suggest. Step 2. To demonstrate that in some way, having set up that we're attacking like an actually good version of the concept, let's look at the things people call meme builds. Now, if I were to use examples, which, by the way, I wouldn't be able to think of, I don't think, people wouldn't know what they were. That doesn't necessarily illustrate it as clearly as thinking about what people could mean by saying something is a meme build. Because the mere fact that people don't use the term meme build in a useful way doesn't mean it couldn't be a concept. But I'm going to argue that there's kind of nothing there. So let's start. What are some conceivable ways people would use calling something a meme build? Well, some of them I've seen, so I'll start there. I mean, something you see often is that people say a thing that is really normal, not weird, not unusual, just an average build is a meme build, or like kind of a meme or to be funny. But the build is, in my subjective opinion, but just to illustrate my point, profoundly normal. And there, you can imagine this in theory. We're not talking about a specific one. There are builds that are just very normal that people say are a meme build. What are they doing there? Well, I think that those people are using the term a meme build as a kind of defense against snarky, kind of illegitimate criticism from, the Reddit comments or whatever. They don't want people to stomp on their fun idea by saying that it's like not the absolute strongest build of all time or whatever. That doesn't really matter in most of these games. It doesn't do anything. The games aren't about that. So that's irrelevant anyway. And the person saying that their build is a meme build knows that people are going to wrongly try to assign that not inherently valuable distinction. Is the build powerful? And the person posting the build, well, they know that that's not what it's about to them. They might not have it in mind what it is about, why did they make the build this way instead of that way? But they know that they don't care about that, and they don't want that type of criticism because it's annoying and pointless. So they say the build is a meme build to head off that type of criticism. I believe this is quite common, though again, I'm not prepared to demonstrate exactly how common. And therefore, most of these builds, many times I see people say a build is kind of a meme. It's just not the most obvious possible thing in the community. It's not particularly strange or unusual or effective or ineffective. It's not particularly anything at all. It's just the thing that the person settled on, and they don't want a type of criticism they know would be unhelpful, unwelcome. And so they call it a meme build, and that's really all the significance that that has, at least in my opinion. So, number one. Now, I would argue, you can see where I'm going with this, that those really aren't memes in any useful sense of the word. We understand sociologically how they are using the term meme build, but it doesn't really refer to anything that is a build that is meme-like. If we feel like we kind of know what meme is as a word cloud definition, and we kind of know what build is as a word cloud definition, the thing that this commenter is saying is a meme build certainly isn't those two things combined together. It is not a meme build. A meme build. So far, meme build doesn't mean anything yet. Let's look at other uses of the term. How about a build that is really particular? The person does value something specific, but they call it a meme build as a way to, again, kind of head off criticism. But this person has in mind a specific other goal that their build has. They want their build to prioritize a type of gameplay or experience that they really like. And so, again, perhaps looking to head off criticism or thinking, oh, I want people to talk about my goal, not some other goal that they have in mind. And I think people often assume the obvious goal is the build good, which it shouldn't be, but it is, sure. So they say this is a meme build. But this thing really isn't a meme either. They're just saying this is a build that has a custom goal rather than a sort of prescribed goal or an assumed goal. But that's just a build. That's what builds are. That's just what a build is. When you play a game, you make a build in a particular way based on your tastes, or based on a mix of your tastes and some, motivations the game puts upon you. That's just a build. I don't think that making a build with a particular specific goal isn't making a build. That's just that just is what using a build system is. And now hold on, you might be saying, well, Zandy, what about people who are deliberately choosing a goal that is something that is kind of bad? Is that the definition of a meme build? It just means a bad build, basically. Well, that doesn't seem quite right either. You could try to make something that was as bad as possible, but people seem to distinguish between that and a sort of meme build that, I agree with you, there is something that people discuss that is kind of bad and something else, and that thing is often called a meme build. What's up with those? Well, this would be something like the build has a very specific goal, and it achieves it in a kind of roundabout way. Maybe it's inherently inefficient, but often the fun of these builds is that they achieve it in a really efficient way. So what the heck is a meme build? What is in here? A particular build, that's not a meme build. A build with an unusual goal, that's not a meme build. Just saying that your build isn't like the really powerful or popular or meta builds or whatever, those things are not the same. Popular doesn't mean powerful, doesn't mean meta, but those different things. That's not a meme build. So what the heck is it? Well, we do have one thing left, and it's a build that is purposefully bad. Not just bad on purpose, but bad in a very structured way. It's trying to do something that isn't a valuable thing to do on its own, even to players. Is that a meme build? Is it something that even the player's not making a build and just valuing something specific? That's just a build. The player is doing something and purposefully doing it, working hard to do it, making a build to do this thing, but the thing they're doing isn't something even they want. Well, that might sound like a meme build. It probably is what most people call a meme build, and we'll get into that. But I would argue that most of the time people are doing something like that would be for a video on the internet to make a meme. I'm not sure that's a build, but it is a meme. I would agree with that. It is technically a build in that it has all the pieces of a build, but it's not ideologically very similar to making a build. They're not really enacting an idea they care about to assert their playstyle preference. They're more like performing a trick, a stunt. It's more like that. And that is similar to a meme, yes. A build where you, say, dodge roll into enemies for incredibly low damage every single time. Oh, would you look at that? Should developers subtly encourage or explicitly discourage meme builds? Liquid continues. On one hand, maybe the useless additions that a game adds are there to encourage those seeking variety or amusement from them. Think the Briar armor in Elden Ring, doing minuscule damage by rolling into an enemy, which led to at least one person doing a whole playthrough with minuscule dodge damage only. Yeah, why did the developers put that in the game? They seemed, or you would hope anyway, that they have some clear idea why they put that in. Is the reason just that they knew that guy would make a video? Of course someone will make a video, it's 2024, where they constantly roll into enemies to do minuscule dodge damage. I don't know, 2023, whenever Elden Ring came out or they were developing that thing, wasn't in 2023, I bet. Is that why they put it in? They were just heading off that somebody would have that kind of fun with it? I would just argue that if that is the case, it is not that similar to a build. It is fairly similar to a meme. From a design perspective, the developers are putting something in the game that they think will be like a playstyle option. That's build-like. But the use of the thing probably isn't going to be very build-like. People aren't going to detect their preferences and then enact them with this thing that seems to purposefully be designed to do low damage. In most cases, my experience has been, I haven't played Elden Ring, so I don't know about this, but my experience has been the meme damage things like this are usually put in the game from a build-making perspective with it in mind that they'll be used in some other way. For example, you could imagine that it's still good to deal a tiny amount of damage when you dodge roll, even if the damage is insignificant, if, for example, there are some effects that you can trigger by doing a little bit of damage. Risk of Rain 2 and its build system have a lot of these things. Anything that has a triggering coefficient coded into it that counts as a hit of damage, a little bullet or whatever, even if it doesn't do much actual damage, can roll a chance to trigger a bunch of your items. And this could be the case in a game like Elden Ring 2. I don't know because I haven't played it. And that's how it's meant to be good. That use of the item is meant to be like the kind of build reason why it's in the game. But the people who made it were not ignorant of the fact that somebody would probably also make a meme build with it, or something they would call a meme build. I would just argue that when that's done, when a person makes a build where they literally only dodge roll into enemies to do damage, they are deliberately not using it to make a playstyle that anybody would enjoy for the sake of creating a good meme. That is, the meme kind of is that it isn't a build, in a way. I would say that my results for my argument with you all, that meme builds kind of don't exist, it's a partial success, in my opinion. I hope I've demonstrated to you that the idea that there is a kind of clear idea that there is a thing that is a meme and a meme build, is flimsy. There isn't exactly such a thing as that in practice. You kind of know what people mean, right? You can go back to my simulation before where I said, oh, well, there's this way of using it and this way of using it and this way of using it, and say, okay, Zandy, well, the person who's using it as a social defense, that's not a meme build, whatever. And the person just making the content creation thing, it's technically a build and it's a meme, so let's just say we know what that is. It's not for you to say nobody would enjoy that, even though we kind of know it's not about anybody enjoying it. It's not anyone asserting their playstyle preference, which is a decent definition of a build. But that's kind of a meme build. And so it boils down to one question. Do the builds with weird focuses that people would only debatably actually enjoy, do those builds get defined as being meme builds more by being good or bad in the game as the game presents it? Now let's make a distinction here. In many games, it is not particularly relevant to do the most effective thing. It's only really helpful to do something that is relatively effective enough. Many games with a lot of build systems, lots of build options in them, understand that it would be very hard to balance themselves if they make it too important that you do really, really well. And therefore they wisely make the difficulty kind of medium. And so being good here we might usefully think of as good enough. I think we can agree that the absolute strongest build you can possibly think of, motivated only by being the most effective in the way you've defined it, but you're also defining it in a way that other people agree is effective, that is basically just an attempt to make a very meta build, we can probably agree that that isn't a meme build. And so here when we ask, are meme builds about being good or bad, we mean good enough or bad. In other words, does the meme build revel in being mostly ineffective? Or is it a build that is effective enough to play the game with normally, but just doesn't care any more than that about being effective? And again, there's no right answer, really, just which one is more in the word cloud of meme buildiness. Liquid's right there with us. Does a meme build have to be successful to earn its memetic status? Memetic? Or is there joy in losing with it? Is there a point where a meme build stops being a meme build and turns into a legitimate build, maybe with certain balancing changes? Interesting. Liquid, my reading of your second point there, does a meme build have to be successful to earn its meme status, or is there joy in losing with it? My reading of that comment is an interesting assumption. It seems like to you, by default, meme builds are effective, and there's a question about whether they're still like a meme build if they're ineffective. My bias coming into the video had been, well, a meme build off the top of my head, I would define as principally ineffective. It principally isn't particularly interested in succeeding, even in being good enough. Certainly not interested in being really, really good in some objective or community agreed upon way. I would have gone so far as to say it's often not even interested in being good enough. It's largely irrelevant whether it fulfills gameplay. But in the way we've defined it, there is a question about, well, of the things left when you interrogate what a meme build could be, they don't particularly assign value to being like succeeded with. Let's go back to that Dark Souls or Elden Ring Thornmail armor thing, for example. The Briar armor is doing a tiny bit of damage to enemies, which may have been put in the game for some other more conventional build use, but is being used to kill enemies. Now you might say, well, the whole point is that it's really, really bad at doing that. It's ineffective, and that's why it's a meme. But the trick is that the meme of the video that was made is that they win with it. So I think it's safe to say that for the meme build, it has relatively little to do with success or failure. The meme build is arguably using a build system to go beyond asserting a playstyle preference, and is instead, the meme is that the build has created a new victory condition. That's going to be my proposal as a result. Meme builds are actually much more like game design than they are making a build. Much more like deciding on new parameters by which success or failure is determined, not using the ones that are there to create a playstyle that fulfills them in a way you might enjoy. This is more about changing the rules. It's more like a meme challenge or a meme run, and people do sometimes call those things that. I think it's just easier for people to understand what you're going to do if you say it's a build, like physically it's a build. The thing you're going to see on the screen is a build. But from an ideological perspective, this doesn't have much in common with making a build as an activity. I think that my perspective on this comes from the fact that I'm talking about making builds a lot, which I think a lot of people don't think about that much. They think it's a build, it's an object. It's not a thing you do, it's a thing you have, or that is, rather than becomes a way. And maybe I'm being a bit of a fruitcake about that, but I think that's perfectly acceptable. What else were we going to do with this parlay? So that would be my answer. For part one, my conclusion would be, I think that meme builds are principally an activity. It's the name of an activity that isn't very much like making a build. It is a meme-like activity where you are more redefining success conditions than you are making a playstyle exactly, though you might then make a playstyle with those redefined success conditions. Meme builds then have something in common in a way with something like speedrunning, where we define a speedrunning category that determines how you win, or how you complete the speedrun. You win by being the fastest, but you complete the speedrun by, doing certain parameters that are not the parameters the game provides. You are not playing tennis with the net up. You're taking the net down and hanging it up a new way before then choosing a style of tennis playing, a racket, tennis clothes or whatever, a ball, with which to play tennis. So there is some build making in there, but the principal hallmark of the activity, in my opinion, is that you are changing the rules rather than that you are like making a build to play in those rules with. So is build a particularly useful term for that? I don't know, but I think it's clear why people use it. And for that, I think we can rest our case and move on to part 2. Just as an aside, this kind of comes up a lot with me. When I write scripts for videos or do Parley, I come to this type of ideological problem a lot, and I thought this was a good example of it, so I want to briefly derail for a few minutes and explain. The problem is basically what just happened, right? We have a definition of a meme build that is, I think, accurate to what people are doing. Psychologically, it understands like what is going on. That was the goal anyway. My goal is for it to understand what's going on when people say something's a meme build. But we know that it isn't how a lot of people think about meme builds. It's arguably more useful and accurate, and not in a way that insists on some specific definition. But in becoming more useful and accurate, in thinking about what a meme build actually is, we've strayed from what we know people will use that term to mean. It might be more useful to use it this way. It could be more useful to us, not in some theoretical world where everybody uses it, but to us right now. It's probably more effective to think of meme builds as that going forward. And yet we know that there are plenty of people who do not think of them that way. Which definition shall we use, or way of thinking about it shall we use? And here's my approach when this happens. Obviously, the Holy Grail would be a definition of something, like meme build, that is kind of an omni definition. It encompasses how people normally use it, and yet it is like actually a good actual definition for people that have engaged with the subject. For people that have spent 22 and counting minutes now discussing what a meme build even is, for those people it is a useful definition and accurate in whatever useful way that means definition, and yet it still refers in some conventional way more or less to how people use the term meme build. And I think I've done that here, though it doesn't always go this well. We have a way of thinking about meme builds that you can basically just talk about people with normally, but then it has more substance if you need to get into the weeds a little. That's obviously ideal. What if you were to not achieve that goal? What if we concluded that meme builds are really quite weird? Or, for example, you could do it with this definition. You insist that meme builds are really not builds. It's a meme run. It's about changing the rules. It's not a build. I think that's persnickety and kind of misses the point, but let's say that you didn't agree with that and you felt like it really was different. What do you do? Do you insist on saying it that way, or do you, say it the way other people say it? And I don't think there's a great answer here. This happens a lot when I'm, again, writing scripts for my own videos or doing Parley with you all. I feel like it's not good to stamp your foot and insist, like, this is the definition of this word. That's not really what we're doing here, but that's a similar place where this problem comes up, right? People say, oh, but technically, roguelike isn't accurate because it's a roguelite, because it blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, yes, but in the physical world that we live in, people have come to use roguelike to refer to, there are very few games that are truly roguelike and not roguelite. They have no meta progression. They're just a roguelike. They have no roguelite meta progression thing in between runs. You progress not at all in between runs. The entire game resets when you die. Those are so uncommon that the term roguelike, meaning a game where there's no meta progression, has become useless. And thus people have naturally, subconsciously, no body of ethics met to decide how people should refer to games. We just all kind of intuitively shifted toward calling roguelites, technically in the past, roguelikes, because roguelite is a meaningless distinction nowadays. And it would be silly to stamp your foot and say, but technically a roguelike means it's like the game Rogue. It doesn't anymore. It doesn't mean that anymore. Fair enough. In the same way, a meme build doesn't have to be a build. Words are constructs. Meme build as a phrase can be like a thing that isn't a build. It kind of is pretty similar to a build, but even if it wasn't, or even if you thought it wasn't, that's fine. It's okay. So on the one hand, insisting on using a kind of prescriptive definition that way would be useless, annoying, not in the name of actually understanding things better. I think the best you can do is just have both. to specify if the conversation gets to a certain point. If someone says, hey, check out this meme build, I'm not going to say, do you mean this kind of meme build or that kind of meme build? But then if they show me a build and it seems off from what I would expect, I'll say, like, tell me more about the meme. You know, what do you think? And then we might get into the weeds and say, hey, people often say this is a meme build, but it's just like a defense against criticism. I'm not going to criticize your playstyle goal. I think that's cool. Why would it be a given that you should make a build be effective? It's about having fun. If it's effective enough, that's the game, and then you're trying to use the build system to have fun. That's what it's there for. Maybe I would go into the weeds like that. But I guess basically all I'm saying is that taking a definition like this or an understanding like this forward, the way I would use these is to try to just keep both in mind. Remember, do not lose track of, don't discard that people use the term meme build in this case in a way that really isn't very connected to what a lot of people mean, technically speaking. But unfortunately, we do have to just remember that if we want to be effective in the real world, while holding on to the definition that is more useful if you actually dig into the subject a little, because anytime you do that, it will almost immediately be better to think of it that way. So that would be you could end the parlay right there, but we're not going to. We're going to continue with this part 2 part. We had read the part about developers subtly encouraging or explicitly discouraging meme builds, and I gave you the example that Liquid gave of a useless addition to a game that is there to encourage people seeking variety or amusement. Again, the Briar Armor could be in Elden Ring as a way to enable normal types of build making with the knowledge that it will be used for memes, or maybe solely for memes. They put it in only to provoke people to do a meme run of the game where they only roll into enemies to do damage. I certainly think the designers of Elden Ring thought about that when they put it in. It's probably pretty obvious that it doesn't do good damage, though Elden Ring's balance is atrocious enough that a topic for another time. So basically this topic is going to be about, should you do that? What are the benefits of doing that or not? And the flip side, which is, on the other hand, Liquid says, there are cases where a change kills a well-known meme build, intentionally or otherwise. The best example I can think of is Dead by Daylight killing the infamous Burger King Michael Myers build, head scratch, which the devs acknowledged and offered condolences for those using the related build pieces as memes. So, of course, I don't know what that is at all, but the idea here is, well, when we say encourage or explicitly discourage memes, it may not be explicit. You know, it's just like, what do you do when memes come into conflict with the game design? So in this Dead by Daylight example, because I know nothing about it, again, we're just going to simulate. Why might a thing have been nerfed that would affect a meme build? Well, probably the thing was rebalanced or changed because of its intended build system use. In my Elden Ring Briar Armor example, this would be the Briar Armor was put in the game to trigger some on damage or on hit items, but could also be used as a meme. And perhaps this is the same situation. This Burger King Michael Myers build maybe uses something that has a more terrestrial or normal or expected build intention that the game developers have their eye on and were balancing around. But in the process of doing that, they rebalanced in such a way that it also damaged a kind of weird use of the thing. And the developers will not be able to foresee all possible builds. So ought you to focus on those things? Well, I think we can go back to the understanding I presented of meme builds in the first place for an answer. A meme build, or the thing we're referring to as a meme build, is in practice often actually a redefining of game win conditions. It is that it is not fully intended, I would argue. It's not really a meme build or a run of the game that is a meme to move the tennis net to a new position if the tennis net is already hung in that position by default when you play the game. Thus, to have memes in your game, and it is fun to have memes in your game, you need to not support everything by default. And of course, it's impossible to do so anyway, that's fine. But then the question becomes, well, what do you do if the meme is kind of killed off? If you support the meme thing, maybe you change the thing you wanted to rebalance in a careful way that doesn't damage the meme build, if possible. Or you don't change it and nerf other things. Possibly it's more changes and more work, but it preserves the meme build. If you preserve the meme build, however you do it, I would make the case that it is not entirely a meme build anymore. You've kind of damaged the activity because I would argue the activity is redefining success conditions in a way that kind of isn't supported. I think a lot of people still enjoy these things in practice. It originated as a meme, and people remember that and hold on to that. And thus, if it is a little bit primarily supported, that's fun to a lot of people. It doesn't ruin the fun for a lot of people, I would predict. Now, obviously, some of you might be thinking, well, hold on. If your meme gets actually supported, that's awesome. That's great. Well, yeah, definitely to some people. I think for other people, the fun is they might say it as that they're doing something weird or unusual, and it doesn't feel unique anymore if everybody is doing it. And I think that that is a fine but shallow, not particularly important motivation. Pretending to be special by doing something nominally different from everyone else isn't, you don't need to bend over backwards to help people do that. That's fine. People can just grow out of it. But there is kind of a deeper version of that fulfillment, in my opinion. There is a like kind of bushwhacking, kind of doing your own game design in a game thing, where it's fun to create something that is sort of neither here nor there with the rest of the game, doesn't have the baggage of the rest of the game. An example of this might be something like a card game like Magic the Gathering, where pieces are coming out all the time, and to play Magic, you have to pick a format. Are we playing the cards released in the past 2 years? All cards printed at common ever. All cards printed for, since a certain cutoff point in history. Whatever, right? What cards are we playing? What format are we playing? And there are formats that people play a lot that are not officially supported. That is, at least the people making the Magic cards do not claim that they are doing game design on purpose to support that format. The format may be designed in a way where it kind of does line up with what's produced. For example, Tiny Leaders is a format where you don't play cards above a converted mana cost of 3, and Magic the Gathering's designers really do use 3 as a converted mana cost, as a cutoff for small cards. That is a thing they actually do. They just don't go a step further and make that into a whole format, and Tiny Leaders does do that. So sure, it does use something about Magic's design. Yes, it's hardly making a totally arbitrary format, but it is absolutely hanging the net a different way for tennis, right? Or you could make a meme format that is not really at all intended to be in line with Magic's design. Something like you can only play cards with moons in their art. There's a good lord a lot of moons in Magic, okay? You could do that. Don't at me about the moon format. I never sold out to Big Moon. You get the idea. And I would argue, if either of those formats became officially supported, it would change them a lot. The moon format, why don't you take a guess if you play Magic? What color are most of the moon cards? Or if you don't play Magic, what kind of aesthetic do you imagine having moons in the art? Vampires, nighttime, evil, or witchcraft, for example. Yeah, it's mostly black cards. If you played this moon format, it would be defined by having way more cards in black than every other color. And if they officially supported it, they would, first and foremost, conceivably just make more moon cards in other colors, right? Green has a lot too because of werewolves, I just realized. Anyway, don't at me about the moon format, but it would change, you see what I mean? And in a way, it would kind of ruin it. There are formats where that's more of a gray area. Tiny Leaders, which is kind of already utilizing an aspect of Magic's design, could potentially benefit in some ways, though I'm sure it would be to its detriment in others, if it was officially supported. But you get the point. It changes them if they're supported. So I would argue that the useful response to this prompt, should developers subtly encourage or explicitly discourage meme builds, is the best is to do as little of either as possible, to be as neutral as possible about the memes. Support the things in the game that are reasonable to support and on target for the game's design. Do not attempt to support every possible archetype that everybody wants. Do not do the marketing thing where you see that players are doing this fun thing and then you make officially supported versions of it and basically claim it for yourself instead, while also holding the thing they enjoy a bit hostage if they don't buy the now, being marketed more expensive kind of pieces for fun for that system. Not every game would have that problem, but you get the idea. This happens a lot in gachapon systems and trading card games and systems like that, where something being officially supported basically means it just got more expensive, which is not arguably very good for the people that like it. Some will interpret it as good. They get more stuff for their thing, but upon further inspection, I am prepared to argue that it's almost always bad for people as a whole. At the same time, completely stomping out memes doesn't particularly make sense either. For example, you can imagine a type of developer who wants their game to be serious and would remove or push away anything that felt like a meme because it damages the tone of the game. This is tone deaf, tone ignorant, arguably. This is not a bug but a feature and not something you can remove. If you support the things out of spite to claim them and redefine them in your design, players will make up a new meme. In fact, it's often that there's a kind of a meme fueled by a meme that came before. You're just going to make it worse. There is no way to not have meme builds in a game, at least in my opinion, unless the game is so dull that nobody bothers, I suppose. So I would argue that the best outcome is to do neither either way. But obviously this seems like a cop-out because you gave a specific example. Should the developers of Dead by Daylight do something about the Burger King Michael Myers build situation or not? Well, originally I'd suggested that you could maybe find a way to just leave the meme untouched while doing the balance changes. But what will often happen is that the developer will simply not know about the meme build. Their community manager should, if it's a large-scale game, sure. And if the meme is fairly obvious, good playtesting could pick it up. But it's not going to pick up every single one, obviously. I am on the side of prioritizing the game's design, of course. There will be other memes, and even though people don't want their meme ruined, I am making the argument that it is a meme because it was never intended or supported, because it is not defended by the game's design. It just kind of happened. There's something organic, I guess, about memes. That's for the meme. Put that in the cloud. To give that or USDA organic sticker, those are expensive. That certification is pricey. So to some extent, I think letting them naturally die when it would happen is sort of the way it has to go. If instead it would be supporting them, I am arguing that it kind of ruins it. I think the reason that when people make that type of argument, it usually doesn't land very well is because it sounds like the person is saying that they don't care about people's meme that they like being destroyed. But I hope that since I talked about this for 40 minutes, you know that that is not why I'm saying it. I'm saying it having deeply engaged with what is fun about the thing. If we see an alternate timeline somehow, and it is revealed to me, Zandy Pants, that if you do support the meme, it remains fun for people, then I think they should support it. I just want people to have fun with it. But I predict that in many cases, supporting it primarily as an official part of the game wouldn't retain the same type of fun, would make it different in some way. If that's wrong, I don't have any stake in it. Like, that's great, support it. And there are cases where I feel like something that was put in the game as like jank, which is kind of related to a bit of a meme, became a really interesting mechanic in a way. It became a kind of emergent piece of design, though I would still argue that it is kind of different than when it was a meme. It's still something fun, but it's not a meme build anymore, or a meme aspect of the game. This isn't a great example, but what comes to mind is in Dota. There is this strange aspect of laning in Dota, where as you're maintaining your lane and defending your tower and pushing back the enemy minions and trying to kill your lane opponents, you can heal by getting this item, and the way it works is you eat a tree. You walk up to a tree and consume it. You remove it from the map. The hitbox of the tree is gone. You delete the tree, and you heal a little bit. You can maybe see where this is going. You can dig paths through what's supposed to be the border of the lane. Dig paths through the woods by eating a ton of trees to ambush people, from what wasn't a passable piece of terrain before, which is a really interesting and fairly significant aspect of playing Dota. And in Dota 2, I noticed when I played Dota 2 for the first time a few years ago that they maintained tangos, they're now called, the things that let you eat trees. Trees have been, this is weird to say, but rebalanced, I guess, a little bit. So there isn't the same feeling of digging a long path to ambush someone. And there are various reasons why you might do that. I don't think it's necessarily a bad choice. But it is different. It doesn't have the same feeling of, yeah, like in original Dota, because the game isn't really designed explicitly for you to be metagaming with eating trees to ambush people, it's hard to eat enough trees to make a path to get to someone, but rewarding if you do. In Dota 2, the game knows that you're going to do that, so it's easier to open a meaningful path through trees, but people kind of know you're going to do that, and there are more paths through trees already. So it has been significantly changed. It's not really not fun anymore. It's still an interesting part of the game to me, but you can see what I mean. It is different. I guess what I would have to say, if someone was upset that their meme was changed in a balance update, is if you can assume that the developer is kind of on your side and trying to help you have fun, which you need to assume for any criticism to make any sense, my question to that person would be, I just want you to think about whether it will be fun to you in the same way, if it will be what you'd like, if they support it. If that's what you want, fair enough. But it won't be the same thing. You can't get back the same thing. People are very bad about loss in criticism. This is kind of a useful thing to know on the internet in general, in my opinion. People are very bad about loss when they criticize things. If something just unfortunately is transient and we need to move on because we're in this existence, people are not very good at acknowledging that in criticism. If there's something kind of essential to the moment the thing happened, I find a lot of lay people kind of won't accept it. They'll behave as if the goal is to retain the previous state of affairs at all costs, which is quite clearly impossible in most cases. Unless the developer simply isn't allowed to rebalance their game, we can't possibly keep things the same. So you can either not have the good balance of the game generally, which will indirectly affect the meme because the game will be a mess, or we do balance the game and then your meme will change. Even if it's supported, it will change. You have to accept that it's going to change and just tell me which change you want, basically, which state of affairs you prefer. Where most people just stamp their foot and say, I don't want change. Like, not to be blunt, but that is just a child's tantrum. That is not engaging with the subject. And so, to me, the real question is just which way is the most net fun for people? That's hard, but that's the job of game design. And I'm just not sure, as a designer, my opinion is that it usually isn't in favor of the most overall fun to cater to the meme build, both because the meme will be at least changed and in some ways ruined by being directly supported, and because it's more important, I think, to prioritize the coherent game design. There will be more memes, people will get to have fun making a meme. It is more important when setting out to make a game that you try to make the game fun the way you intended it to be fun. Of course, you could pivot the entire game to be more about the meme and have it be an emergent piece of design, but that is well and truly a different activity, and once again, it does significantly change the meme. It's really not a meme anymore, that's the game. And that will affect people's enjoyment in some way. Not saying that's always bad, but in many developed games, it doesn't really make sense for Dead by Daylight to fully change and become about this meme build, I would predict. I don't know, maybe. Or for Elden Ring to become about dodge rolling into enemies. That's not really a problem. That's something they clearly included for memes. And so you're gonna leave the meme to the side. It will make sense to focus on the game's primary gameplay loop and objectives, the design goals the game had, not the design goals of the version of the game where you've moved the net and you're using a meme build to play that. That is something different. It might occasionally make sense to make a new separate game that supports that. That happens now and again. Sometimes a part of a game is fun enough on its own that you kind of desire to have it by itself, and occasionally you have these things crop up. There's not great examples off the top of my head, but stuff like Gwent, the Witcher card game. The Witcher has a card game in it, and you can play it in The Witcher, you can play it in, it has a standalone card game version, okay? They made it into a standalone thing. There, this is not really the same thing, but like there is lore in League of Legends, but the gameplay loop doesn't really have anything to do with any of it. They have made spin-off games that are like role-playing games, like story-based, dialogue-heavy role-playing games that are like about the lore. That you could say in a way that's kind of similar. It's not really a meme, but you get what I mean. You make a spin-off that is, this could be an interesting part of the game if focused on, but that still arguably isn't a reason to focus on it in the game that we have in our hands. It might be a reason to make a whole different game that focuses on that. Occasionally, it might make sense to just leave it alone. I don't think going out of your way to nerf them unless they hurt the game's primary balance makes much sense. But I do get pretty frustrated when I see people arguing that because the meme is fun to them, the entire game's primary design, the thing the game is trying to do well, should all be thrown out because the meme is more worth it to them. Obviously not. Like, no. I mean, you could do that argument a good way and say, I don't think this game is fun, but that is what you were saying when you say that. It's not a good reason to make the game be the meme. That's a reason for you to stop playing that game. It doesn't have the priorities that you want. People have a tendency to respond and say, well, but this is the more fun way to do it. The developers don't like fun. This is usually just closed-minded, though. You just haven't thought about how people are having fun with the game that's there. I'm not the person who's going to say developers always know what's best for their game. They blatantly don't. I constantly, relentlessly, my entire career is criticizing how relatively poor, unfortunately, I think a lot of development choices in games are. Yes. But I don't think it makes more sense to focus on a very specific part of a game that is only fun in the first place, because it isn't the primary focus of the game. And I think a lot of players are not thinking about the kind of the long term in other players, which is the job of a game designer. They're not thinking, but what if I did this all the time, rather than it being a niche thing that I did sometimes, and then there's the rest of the game. The player doesn't have the vision to think about that. They are not a professional game designer. A lot of professional game designers also don't think about that, but that doesn't mean either party is particularly fit to make the decisions, and it probably makes sense to just stay the course. Okay, that's all I have to say. A few closing thoughts. Liquid, you said, how many examples of meme builds do you actually know of, and how do they relate to these questions? And you'll have figured out by now that I decided to steer away from that approach in my response. I can think of a few examples from doing this parlay. This is also my second take of this parlay. So I have a few examples, and I did give you like one or two examples here and there just to illustrate the point I was trying to make. But I decided not to focus on them. It's hard to think of a lot on the spot, unless I spend a lot of time after reading the parlay before I record it. And just being, there's not really anything you can do. It's not your fault, Liquid, but being asked on the spot, what are your favorite meme builds? That's not exactly what you're saying, but fries the human brain. This is something I've learned from becoming the jumping jack champion of Q&A. And so I'm not gonna think of that many good examples. That's just a fact of how our brains work, unfortunately. But also I think it's hard because the whole thing is it's a gray area. Like to some people, I think a lot of the things we do when I stream are meme feeling builds just because the idea is silly, but I don't particularly think that that's a helpful way to interpret a meme build. You could argue that eating through the trees to ambush people isn't much of a meme at all. I think it's a little silly, and there are many games that use more conventional mechanics to do a similar gameplay loop. But I mean, who's to say that Dota isn't the original game for that type of gameplay? It kind of literally is. And so why is eating trees silly? You know, I don't know. It was just the best I could do for an example. So I kind of sidestepped that part, but I just wanted to acknowledge it. It's not unreasonable to ask. As usual, I want to say you, Liquid, did a real service to the parlay by giving some examples of your own. Even if I didn't know what they were, we can still play off of them a little bit. That's very helpful. I believe that in the utilitarianism of parlay, it's usually easier for the prompter to come up with that kind of thing than it will be for me to on the spot. And I'm quite thankful that a lot of you do a really good job giving examples like this in parlay. That's something that always impresses me when I get parlay. These are pretty good examples. I can see that you thought about this a lot enough that you wanted to pay $9 to get it made into a video. Like, I feel that. Folks, if you would like your own parlay like this one for $9, and you can stay signed up and get them every month if you want. You can get those using a link in the description. There's details about how to get it down there. Love to have you aboard. And Liquid, thanks very much for your support. Looking forward to the next one if you decide to stay on. This was a lot of fun. I wasn't unhappy to do a second take of this. It's a cool topic. Good prompt.